as a little kid, I was really interested in nutrition, even though that got me made fun of for sure. And I discovered kombucha maybe 9 or 10 years ago, and I definitely was super judgmental about it because I thought people were just, jumping on a trend, that it wasn't going to do anything. And then I actually tried it, and it really helped my stomach out. And so since then, I've become a believer.
Thanks, Liv. Brad, would you like to go next?
Sure. So I grew up in Eastern Oregon, and I can definitely identify with the initial that you had, Lindsay. I definitely don't. Yeah, it was a really conservative place that I grew up, and so even though I went to college in Western Oregon and became kind of a bush hippie, I definitely still had I don't know about this kombucha stuff when I was first introduced to it. But yeah, it clearly has really good benefits to my gut. My lactose intolerance hasn't been as severe since I had it, and I got a SCOBY and was growing one for a while, but I've moved around a lot, and so when I recently started my studies down here in Las Cruces and other travels, I kind of got rid of my SCOBY and wasn't able to keep it over the winter. So I'm interested to find out if there's a way to grow a SCOBY, because that would be really cool. Because I just kind of bought my first one.
Yeah, you can.
Cool, awesome. So
yeah.
I guess that's probably enough about me for now. Thanks.
And did you say you were calling in from Las Cruces, New Mexico?
Yes.
Nice.
Yeah.
And Brad, do you have a Shadowcliff connection, or how did you hear about the program? I'm just curious.
Yeah, no. Back in 2017, I took a course with my advisor, Soren Larson, who was putting on a course called Place Writing. Okay. And we had a guest speaker, Tina. I'm going to forget her last name, but she's the editor-in-chief of The New Territory.
Oh, Tina Casagran. Cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And so just randomly I had something come through my email, or maybe it was through The New Territory. And then we had a get together, and then that's how I got connected to Shadowcliff.
Sweet. Very cool. Thanks. Allie, do you want to go? If it's not convenient for you, you have your hands full.
No, it's fine. We were just getting home from the park. I was trying to wear him out, but I don't think that's going to happen. So I'm Allie. I am in Iowa. I have connections to Shadowcliff through Amanda Mooney. I think she's something for your guys' I don't know, something.
Yeah,
so
she's
that's
been
how
a volunteer.
I work with her.
Awesome. Yeah.
So that's me.
Awesome.
I have just a passion for sustainability, and we have a slow growing homestead, and I just like knowing how to not have to purchase things off the shelf that I don't know where they came from. So I just absorbing all the knowledge I can get. That's about me.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us. And Jeannie, is that
I'm coming to you from the Oregon coast, in Newport. And my connection with Shadowcliff is very recent. I just finished a writing workshop with Lori Goodham, and several of the people in that workshop had been on site at Shadowcliff in previous years. So I got adopted into the group, even though I've never been there in person.
Cool.
And I'm a retired educator and founder of the PFLAG, the LGBT support group on the Oregon coast. My wife and I feel like we were the first gays to ever arrive in Oregon 30 years ago. And we both worked for the school system, and when we retired, we have been busy ever since. working with the schools to train them to be supportive of LGBT kids.
Mhm.
So that's, and my best friend provides me with kombucha now and then, but I would like to know how to make my own.
Awesome. Good.
Very good. Well, so glad we have such a great group here. Thanks so much for joining. I will turn it over to Liv here briefly, and then I'll kind of wrap up at the end of the hour. But I just wanted to mention quickly my connection with Liv here. She can talk more about this too, but I used to live in Kansas City, so we got to know each other probably
In person.
like, yeah, in person. I know. Can you imagine? It was probably like 8 or 9 years ago at this point, I guess. And Liv and her husband Jeff and their friend came out to Shadowcliff when I was working out there one season, so they got to see the place and hang out in Grand Lake for a little while. And I know Liv is a talented lady on multiple fronts. Like she said, she's an aerialist, and she's an amazing cook. Like, you know all the things with the gluten-free cooking and the special diets, but like, whatever you're making, it's always delicious. So I'm really glad that you're able to join us here today and share a little bit of your knowledge. So I will turn it over to you now. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. I'm glad to know you enjoy my cooking. Yeah, I've had to experiment a lot just because of my dietary restrictions, because I have a few like random food allergies, but my biggest hindrance is the gluten intolerance. A little bit of lactose intolerance. My body likes to eat certain things and not others, like ice cream, no, but yogurt, Greek yogurt in small amounts I'm fine with, for example. But yeah, getting to the kombucha. So I was living in Portland when I first discovered it, and I went to a friend's house and I saw one of these jars on top of the refrigerator, and I was just like, no, no, because it looked like this, which was a little scary at first. And then, yeah, tried it. Definitely enjoyed the digestive benefits because my stomach is, I never know how I'm going to feel. So let's get to the basics. I'm going to list off all the things you need from day one. You actually, there's several stages to kombucha brewing, because you have the initial brew, placing it with the SCOBY, and then the bottling process is later. But so the kombucha itself is fermented tea. So you have to use sugar in the process. A lot of people don't want to consume sugar. I'm not a big fan of eating sugar, but the process, it converts to sugar, so you have to have it. So I have pre-brewed my tea today. And I'll just show you all the things that are needed. So mise en place, everything in its place before you even get started with anything in the kitchen. Make sure you have all the things you need, right? You don't want to be baking a cake and then be like, oh, I don't have any eggs, but I've already done all the other things. Yeah, so it's kind of hard to see. You'll need a large pot. This one's pretty big. It's too big for how much I made, but the next size down that I have is actually too small. So I have like my stock pot. You'll want to have a plastic or wood ladle, a funnel, wooden spoon, and measuring cups. If you use loose leaf tea, then you'll need some way to strain it. If you use tea bags, then that's not going to be a problem. I use loose leaf, so I use my colander here. That is mostly for the first brew. The other items you'll need in general for kombucha is largemouth jars that are big enough to put your hand inside. So something like this. And you can see there's the SCOBY that I'm going to use today. This is actually about 5 SCOBYs. But I just keep them all in the same jar because it's easier. So you'll need, depending on the size of the batch that you want to make, 1 or 2 of these probably good. I'm not sure of the volume of this one. It's definitely at least a gallon. So I keep 2. Oh, that one does have the measurement on the side, so yeah, it's gallon. And then your bottles. So these, I actually have my last batch are currently in these bottles. I got these, I was in Asheville, North Carolina, because my family's from East Tennessee, and we have family all over that area, and stopped by a place that had kombucha on tap, which was fantastic, and picked up these growlers from there. You can use a variety of bottles. This type of top seems to do really well, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. The dark bottles also very beneficial because you don't want light to get into the kombucha. You can use a clear bottle. I have one with the same type of Grolsch pop top. Just when you store it, you want to make sure you put it in the dark, and it should be okay. So that's the bottles. Another item you'll want to have on hand for the whole process is apple cider vinegar. And when you do your very first batch, it's good to have a bottle of plain kombucha just to help it get started. And last but definitely not least is our tea and our sugar and our SCOBY. So this is massive. My preference is loose leaf green tea. A lot of people use black tea, and both of them are great. I occasionally use white tea as well. And then I lately have been playing with using, this is Tulsi, which is like a type of basil. So it's just herbal. It's really, there's a friend of mine has a farm in Lawrence, Kansas, the Sacred Sun. And this smells so good. Just having the tea sitting here, my kitchen is really fragrant right now. And I have my sugar, which is, kombucha is basically the only reason I have sugar in the house. So I got organic evaporated cane juice. As long as it's sugar and not artificial sweetener or honey, you can add some of those things after you've fermented, but the fermentation process needs the sugar. So there's all of the, paper towel / something that is breathable for the tops of your jars. I use paper towels with a rubber band around the top. You can use cloth and you can use cheesecloth, but if you did, you would want a couple of layers because fruit flies will be attracted to this, and you definitely don't want them to be attracted to this. So I believe that's all the items. So what I did this morning was I brought about a gallon of water to a boil in my stock pot. And then I added my loose leaf tea. Your ratio is, I got my recipe from looking at a couple of different sites and consulting with a couple of friends who gave me my first SCOBY. And generally the ratio of tea to water to sugar is somewhere in the vicinity of 3.5 quarts to a gallon of water to 1 full cup of sugar to 8 tea bags, or the equivalent of that much loose leaf tea. So because I use loose leaf, I did about 5 teaspoons of that, and then 3 or 4 teaspoons of my my Tulsi. And you can play with that. It really just matters how strong do you want the tea aspect of it to be, and do you want it to be more caffeinated or less caffeinated. You could also play with how long you allow the tea to steep in the water before you drain it out or remove the tea bags. So you can play with that amount of tea. Then you add in the sugar. So I brought the water to a boil and I turned it off, and I put the tea and the sugar into the pot and stirred it together. And then I've been letting it cool on my countertop. You can see it's in these 2 glass bowls. Normally I just let it cool in the pot, but for the purposes of this meeting, I went ahead and put them here, and I have a little ice pack sitting between it so that it cools. So this is ready to go into my jar now. And that's the stage that I'm just gonna do with you guys here. The most important part right now is that the tea is cool enough, because the heat can damage the SCOBY. So you don't want to put hot tea into your jar. And now the purpose is, if I were to be, if you have, for example, a SCOBY that somebody has given you in a plastic bag, you would need to reach into your bag with your hands possibly. So for any stage that you're actually handling your SCOBY or dealing with the fermented part, you want to have everything cleaned, not only with soap, but rinsed with the apple cider vinegar. So I'm gonna pick up my SCOBY just to show you guys, and I'm gonna rinse my hands in vinegar. So I've already washed my hands, and I just wanted to reach in here and just show you this little jellyfish that happens. So this, every time you brew, I know, right? Every time you brew, it'll make a new skin on the top. And each one of these can be used to make a different batch. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is from 5 different times in this jar. It feels like rubber, a little slimy. The smell does remind me of apple cider vinegar. It's a little bit sweet and a little bit tangy. So I've already rinsed my ladle in apple cider vinegar, and I'm just gonna add my tea into my jar. Let's see if y'all can see that. If the mouth of this was smaller, I might use a funnel. I use the funnel when I'm bottling. In fact, I may be able to just pour directly from the bowl. Yep, that's working. Yay, so this actually made a bit more than I anticipated. To be honest, I've gotten so used to this that I don't really measure anymore. And the beauty of kombucha is that you can be really, really forgetful, and it will work fabulously for you. So I usually just try to make enough to fill up both of my jars and call it a day. I'm gonna fill this up to the top, or not quite to the top, just maybe to this line. And then I'm gonna pour the rest of it into the other jar. So since I have already got some kombucha, I don't necessarily need to use my new jar. But I'm going to pour it in just for this one. I'm going to leave the old kombucha in this jar, and I want to see if I can tell much of a difference. The reason you want to use this is it encourages the fermentation process, one, but an early problem a lot of people encounter is that the kombucha doesn't get as fizzy as what you find in the store. And that happened for me the first few times, is that it didn't have the refreshing quality that like this kind of stuff has. And I just realized that that it was my bottling process. So I'm gonna use like most of it. I'm probably just gonna drink this later. So after you've done your tea, you've blended in your sugar, you've added your SCOBY and your starter tea, which I'm gonna call that my starter tea. You'll just cover it with the paper towel or whatever you've chosen. Get that the rest of the way. And then you'll set it in a place where it won't be disturbed. And for me, that is on top of my refrigerator. In my old place, my cat could get on top of my refrigerator, so I was just like, I don't want her to knock stuff over, but here she hasn't figured it out. So we're gonna try to keep it that way and keep her and the fruit flies out of my kombucha. Sorry, so I have my doubled up, trying to find it, doubled up paper towels. I'm just gonna place it over the mouth of the jar, and my rubber bands, whatever you've got. Actually, my rubber bands I salvaged off of produce whenever, I think this one's like from a broccoli, you know, like how they hold broccoli together at the grocery store. I just use those. Sustainability. So cover the mouth. This is short because this is probably the hardest part, is really making sure that you do everything with really clean hands and that there are no contaminants allowed in the kombucha. As long as you keep it healthy in that way and give it enough sugar, it's gonna last, and you'll have like as many batches as I have made. So these go on the fridge. I'll put them over here for now. And then when you get, so it's about, depending on the weather, when it's warm weather, you'll see it form a skin on the top of the liquid within a week and a half to 2 weeks. When I've made kombucha batches in the winter, when it's definitely colder, I'll wait 3, maybe even 4 weeks. Like the longest I've waited is probably 4 weeks, because it just didn't look like it was doing very much. But it's got to grow and it's got to ferment, and so weather plays a role, but at least 2 weeks in the jar with the SCOBY. And if you're not sure if it's doing it, you can just give it a little shake, and the top SCOBY might sink a little bit, and that's okay. You'll see them move, and after about 2 weeks, if you want to see what the flavor is, you can pour a little bit out and just give it a sip. If it's still really, really sweet, it means it hasn't converted all the sugar, and you may want to let it go for a few more days. When it's to a place that you feel good about, and that's up to you, you can do your bottling process. So when you get to that stage, again, these are great. This type of top seems to help the kombucha actually carbonate. I've used other ones, and within the same batch, the ones that had, this is another like large growler. When I used this bottle with just a regular lid, it seemed flatter than the other one. And I'm not sure if this creates maybe more of a suction when it closes, but it does get a better flavor. So when you are ready to bottle, that's where your funnel comes in. And if you really don't like the stringy little bits that get in kombucha, you can strain it again at this stage. But as long as it's fermenting, it's going to produce those. Those are just part of the process, and they're nothing to be afraid of. So I usually I wash everything with soap, and then I rinse every element in the apple cider vinegar, which I've already done. I rinse my funnel, I rinse my bottles, my ladle, my hands, and just place it in, ladle it in until it's not quite full. You need air to be in the bottle to help further the process of fermentation, and that gives it space to get carbonated. This is the stage where you could play with flavors. If you're not a big fan of the plain kombucha, this is the stage where you could add in any type of juice or spices. I've done vanilla before, and I like that because it kind of gives a root beer type of flavor. You could do any blend of herbs and flowers like chamomile or lavender. I love lavender. You would add them in at the bottling stage and then close up as long as you still have an inch or two of space in the bottle. Then you close it up, and then you put it in a cupboard or somewhere that it won't get light. And this stage, you can also play with the timing. You typically need 4 to 5 days of it being bottled, and then you can leave it longer. This batch I left maybe 10 days to 2 weeks, and it got fizzier than the one before. I haven't been adding flavors to mine just because I like the taste of it plain. You can see mine gets, it's a little bit like apple juice. You can see the bubbles. It's not the fizziest. It's not quite as fizzy as that. Let me check. It has some, but this is probably my favorite blend because it still picked up the flavors from the Tulsi. So yeah, after that part, you can put it in the refrigerator, and it will continue to ferment even more, and there will be a slight amount of alcohol in it if that's a concern for you. It's kind of hard to avoid because of the nature of the process. Let me see. If you want it to be sweeter, you could add honey or any other sweetener at this stage. I usually don't. Another thing I like to do, if you want it to be fizzier, we are frequent consumers of the mineral waters, the liqueur, whatever flavors you like. Typically, I'll crack open a can and split it half and half in 2 glasses, and then flavor that with the kombucha. It kind of extends the life of your kombucha, and very refreshing and fizzy. So, hope I didn't skip anything. That's the basics. One question that I had was I was afraid of what to do with my SCOBY when I'm not brewing, and what is it gonna stay safe? Is it gonna get gross? And what I typically do if I'm between batches is my mom was a bread baker, and she always kept yeast in the house, and she would be like, oh, I gotta feed my starter. And I use that phrase because I'll feed my kombucha even between brews. I'll just put like a teaspoon of sugar and water in the jar just to keep it fermenting, keep it alive. I did let it die a couple of times. I went out of town on a contract. It was only like 6 or 7 weeks, and I got back and it had shriveled up. It looked like a dried out mushroom, and there was no bringing that one back. So I got rid of it, and then
How often would you water it or feed it?
That depends on how often you want to brew your next batch. So I probably would do that like once a month. As long as you always want to keep a few inches of liquid with the kombucha. It needs to be suspended a little bit.
Okay.
It'll dry out pretty quickly. So if I brewed and then bottled 2 weeks and 2 weeks, and I didn't feel like making another batch, when I bottle it, I wouldn't use all of the liquid to put in the bottle. I would leave maybe an inch in there and then give it sugar at that stage, right after I bottle it. And then maybe, depends on how long it takes me to drink these. And for me, I make 2 of these plus maybe half the other one at a time. So it takes us a minute to get through it. So I probably do that. If I'm consistent with it, it's like every other month I start a brew. Yeah, I did have one time that it got bad, or it went bad, not got bad. And the kombucha SCOBY smelled like acetone or a nail polish remover. And that's when I was like, no. But that's the only time that, I don't know why it got like that. I think I had gone out of town. I don't remember, but I do remember it smelled weird and I threw it out. Generally, that's how you'll tell, is it should smell about like apple cider vinegar, slightly sweet, slightly tangy, and have that coloration. It'll get dark little spots, like, oh man, that's heavy, strands that float around in the bottom. You can kind of see it. It's like the tentacles of the jellyfish, and those are fine. Those are perfectly safe. But if the whole thing like gets mold on it, like traditional looking fuzzy mold, it's no good. And you, Brad, you had asked about starting a kombucha without the SCOBY. You can do that if you save some of the floaties from these bottles, maybe from like 2 or 3. I'm not sure. Save a few of those floaters, and then you could also add some of the sediment from the bottom of your apple cider vinegar, and it can help start. It might be a slower process because it's just going to be a little bit weaker, and it may take longer for it to eat the sugar, but it can happen. From the
Brad, I have a thing here in my book if you want to screenshot it.
Oh, sure.
Okay, I'll try to figure out how to flip my camera around.
You have a kombucha book? Ah, very nice. Yeah, it's a little hard to read.
Yeah.
Oh, it is.
Well, that's okay. We'll see how the screenshot works with it. Thanks, Allie.
You're
Yeah.
welcome.
Yeah, I think that's the basics of it. Does anybody else have questions or concerns or curiosities?
I'm curious. So, like, you're saying that it doesn't matter if it's like white, green, or black. Is that like, as long as you? My understanding is that, I mean, essentially you're growing, like the bacteria you know,
Mhm.
SCOBY. So each SCOBY probably has their own little nuances as far as like what that bacteria community looks like. So if you like, if you're gonna like just do one, you can't just do like really drastic changes to the makeup of what you're putting into it right away, right? Because it's gonna take time for the bacteria to kind of evolve and process if you change teas or you change
Yeah. Well,
sugars. Or
from what I could tell online, most commercial brands use black tea, and I
Yeah.
think it's just the most consistent. Something about the tannins, it needs to be a bit on the acidic side anyway. And I've bought some that had green tea as well. What you don't want to do is use a tea that has other things added to it, like a chai, for example, is too many variables, and I don't know what the spices could do to the SCOBY. Like cinnamon may have a negative effect on the SCOBY, but if you wanted a chai flavor, you could add those things to the bottling stage.
Cool.
So flavored teas would not be recommended.
Right. You want to go with plain, plain green, plain black, organic if you've got it. Don't freak out too much if you don't have organic. It is better because any kind of thing where you're consuming the leaf of the plant, that's where you want to be free from pesticides, because those types of plants, it's hard to clean the pesticides out of them before they're packaged and given to you. For example, like spinach and kale, those are types of things you want to buy organic versus things like bananas or oranges or squash. They're easier to wash off. So that's a place where I try to prioritize my organic. But if you've already got a lot of black tea or green tea that's not organic, I wouldn't throw it out. Just use what you have, but make sure it's not got additives.
Is there a correlation between how much sugar you add at the first step and how vinegary it gets? Or is that purely just due to how I guess, long it sits?
Yeah, I think the longer you leave it with the kombucha, the stronger that flavor is going to get, the less sweet it's going to be, the more fermentation happens. The vinegary type of flavor, I think, goes away if you bottle it better and let it get fizzy. If you let it stay in the bottle long enough, I think a lot of people are like, all right, I've bottled it, now it's time to drink it, and it's jumping the gun a bit. Because my first few batches were like, oh, I guess this is what homemade is going to be like, you know? Okay. And then I kept going and they got better. I've fudged the sugar. Like sometimes I'll add more, sometimes less, and it's very forgiving. You just sample it as you go and be intuitive. I'm more like that. I'm very forgetful. So I'm like, oh, when did I bottle that? It's been at least a week. I'll just try it.
Yeah, that was me too.
Yeah.
Yep, I didn't know about the bottling process either. I just got vague instructions from a friend over text, and
Yeah.
the first batch I made was like flat, and then the second batch I made, I only used one layer of cheesecloth, so you can imagine what happened there.
You get fruit flies.
Sorry. It was disgusting. And
yeah,
I almost just poured a glass just to try it without like legit looking at it, and I'm glad I looked at it. But I got discouraged.
It's heartbreaking.
Like, I haven't like made it since my first two failed. So.
Well, and you could do the make your own SCOBY, or you could just post online, anybody have a SCOBY I can have? Because most cases, if your friends are brewing it, they are probably overflowing with SCOBYs and like, I feel bad throwing it away when somebody could use it. So I've given plenty of mine away. I feel like I look evangelical with my SCOBY. I'm like, do it, it will save you.
Yeah, so like there's a point where like you have just too many layers of scobies and you kind of just need to separate.
Yeah, I'll usually ditch the oldest one and keep the newest one if I'm at that place. But I mean, both of my jars have at least 5 layers of them in there.
Yeah.
The longer you leave it brewing, the thicker the new SCOBY will get. So it'll start looking like a gravy skin, like a little thin layer, and each day it'll just get puffier and puffier. And it'll form to the shape of your jar. My round one gets round scobies, and my other jar is square, so they're like a little bit square shaped. And that's that. And if you have the kind of jar that has a tap at the bottom, you want to make sure that it's not metal. There's something about metal can interact with the kombucha. It's better to have glass, and if it has a spout, a plastic spout. I don't have any of those. I just have this glass jar. I sometimes use it even with like mixed drinks. Like I'll be like, how about a little rum and fizzy water and kombucha?
I'm not making this up, but are there any fruits or flavors that you would recommend not adding? Like for some reason I had in my mind like citrus would do something one way or the other. Yeah, I don't remember if it's good or bad, but
I think again, it's whatever you add, you'll add at the bottling stage. Yeah. And I've seen citrus flavors in the grocery store. One of the really good ones, I think the GT brand has a grapefruit one. It's tasty. My favorite are the lavender and the ginger cayenne. That one's good. And you could do the ginger at the bottling stage. I think that'd be pretty awesome.
I think that question probably came from a past mistake that I made. I did something wrong, and that's why.
As so many do.
One thing I did when I was brewing is I was never too concerned about the fizziness of it, but I would like if I had like a jam jar that like had all the residual like that I couldn't get with the knife or spoon, I would just pour it into there and put the top on, and then let that sit for a couple of days, and it would just eat up that sugar and flavor and kind of flavor it a little bit.
Oh, the jam.
Yeah.
That sounds cool. Actually, it sounds really good. What else have I done? Flowers. Oh, cherry juice was the first one that I did try from a friend that made it at home. And the benefit cherries has is that it's got a compound in it that behaves like ibuprofen. So cherry juice can be really good for if you have problems with inflammation. That and like turmeric, different ways to fight inflammation in your body without having to take medication. So you could add that. I have not tried adding turmeric specifically to kombucha. When I use turmeric, it's just a separate thing. I'll make like a tea with it, but I've not tried doing that here. The problem I have with it is it sinks and it doesn't mix in. So, yeah. I think that's all that I've got.
Cool. Hey, Mimi, have you had kombucha before?
Never. No, but it reminds me of something, but I won't talk about it. But I'm from West Virginia in the mountains.
Is it shrub by any chance?
Are you talking about homebrew?
No, that was a big thing several years ago.
Well, I'm from East Tennessee, so my first alcohol experience was definitely moonshine.
Oh, really? Okay. I can even, the basement in our home even smelled different when you would go down in the basement. I don't know the recipe or anything, but anyway, I won't go into history.
Oh boy, I'm learning some family history right now.
Oh yeah, I have a lot I haven't shared.
Could be worse.
This is interesting.
Well, thank you so much, Liv. Do we have any other last questions before we wrap up?
Yeah,
Is there any events that you guys are going to be doing in the future?
Yeah,
Any
just
more of
other
your
events like this?
other Shadowcliff stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're actually kind of on the tail end of our first Communiversity series here. We've got a couple more coming up, and they are listed on our website, which is just shadowcliff.org. I will type that and put it in the chat box. I would say, like, I welcome any feedback on this too, because this Communiversity program series is something brand new that we're trying this year. And thanks to really generous folks like Liv who are volunteering to share some skills like this. If there's interest, we want to do more things like this, and we could even see it growing into sort of like a revenue sharing model where we can offer more programs, expand our programming like this. So if you have any feedback, thoughts, suggestions, we'd love to hear that. There are a couple of more sessions, like I said, on our website, and you can kind of see what we've offered in the past too. We are recording these sessions, so we will make those available online later as well too. So I'll send you an email when that's an option.
Okay.
Does that help?
You hopefully don't get all the craziness in the background. It's just of Lindsay, hopefully.
Don't worry about it. Yeah, I had it on speaker view. We'll sort of do that. Don't worry.
No, it was very informational, and I appreciate you guys. Some like camping and like lodging stuff would be cool in the future, which I'll have to go to the website and look at the previous ones. Amanda had just told me about it a couple weeks ago, and I was like, oh yeah, I need to get on there and see what ones are coming up, and I think I maybe missed a few of the prior ones, but
Got it. Well, yeah, just to tell you a little bit more, so the physical place that is Shadowcliff is located in Grand Lake, Colorado, and it's basically a small campus of buildings. We have 2 lodges that have lodge rooms and a hostel, and then we have 3 cabins. So all those can be rented out by guests, individuals, families, but we also host a lot of groups and retreats that come out. Shadowcliff is a seasonal organization, so it's usually open from the end of May through the end of September. It's at about 8,400 feet, so we definitely have to close down for the winter. But normally during the year that would be open, and the lodges would be kind of this beautiful, bustling place. We have some really nice communal spaces, living room, dining area. So it's a really nice experience, and it's a great place to connect with lots of different people. It also has this really rich volunteer history, which is how Amanda got connected with us. We have a tradition of having this big volunteer weekend over Memorial Day, where folks from Shadowcliff years past and present show up and help open up the lodge for the season. So that's a really fun time. And then we'll have so we'll have to include you all on opportunities like that in the future. And of course, we're all kind of working hard to figure out what next year's season could look like. But you will definitely be invited to join in those on-site opportunities in the future too, if you're interested.
And if you guys ever get the chance to go to Shadowcliff, it is really beautiful and amazing. The Grand Lake is incredible. Yeah, it was a good vacation for us.
Cool. Very good. Well, I'm also just going to drop a little link in the chat box here in case anyone is interested in kind of tipping us for this program. It takes some resources to put things like this on. It's a pilot program, so we're trying to see if this is something feasible we can do and expand on in the future. But anything you might be able to help support with would be appreciated. And there's lots of information on our website too. Thanks for joining us. Hope you stay in touch. Thank you, Liv.
Bye.
Thanks, Liv.
Bye-bye.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.